Senator, I'm delighted to have you here. I want to talk about the First Step Act, but before we do, I want to get into something that's been very much in the news. One of your colleagues, Republican, Senator Jeff Flake, has held up the judicial appointments that are really critical because he wants a bill that has nothing to do with judicial appointments. It has to do with protecting the special counsel. I saw you make a brilliant and very passionate plea on the constitutional basis for separation of powers, and this is why you said you could not support Senator Flake's actions. Give us a brief explanation.
The U.S. Department of Justice is run by the Attorney General. The Attorney General is nominated by the President and confirmed by the President, by the Senate, and he serves at the pleasure of the President. All of the principal prosecutorial officials, so for example, not just the U.S. Attorney General, but all the U.S. attorneys in the United States go through that same process, and they serve at the pleasure of the President. This is what it means to be part of the executive branch. Justice Scalia, in his classic opinion in a case called Morrison v. Olson, explained that it's unconstitutional to create a de facto fourth branch of government inside the Department of Justice, of somebody who's protected from any kind of attachment to our elected president. And Justice Scalia is right, and on that basis, the Congress declined to extend the independent counsel statute. Senator Flake's legislation would have the effect of creating a new type of independent counsel statute, a de facto fourth branch of government, unaccountable to anyone who's elected. And I think that's wrong. It is unconstitutional, and I can't support it.
Well, for that, by the way, Judge Napolitano, I saw him on Fox News, called you the constitutional conscience of the Senate, which was high praise, and I couldn't agree more. But I want to talk about sentencing reform, federal guidelines for sentencing. You have worked tirelessly on this. Some people would maybe be surprised that so many Republicans, including me, have been a part of this effort to bring reform to our federal sentencing guidelines. Let's first just lay out the basis. Why does this matter to America?
It matters to America, Governor, because we have a federal criminal justice system that needs to be more effective and more efficient. We've got too many minimum mandatory sentencing laws that are putting people behind bars, sometimes for decades at a time, sometimes for 55 years at a time. In the case of a young offender named Weldon Angelos, who sold 3 dime bags of pot to a confidential informant over a 72-hour period. And because he had a gun on his person at the time and the way he was charged, the federal district judge had no option, no discretion, no choice but to sentence him to 55 years in prison. When we do that, what that does, it not only undermines faith in the criminal justice system as unfair, but it also diverts resources away from the truly dangerous offenders and puts them toward more less serious offenders like Mr. Angelos. This bill would help ameliorate the effects of these hyperactive minimum mandatory sentences, and just as importantly, it would create incentives for individual prisoners to get training and treatment they need in prison to reduce their risk of recommitting offenses after they get out of prison.
We're locking up 1 out of every 33 Americans at some point in their life these days. That's changed from 1 in 77 during the Ronald Reagan era. So a lot of people are going to prison, and I can't believe that everybody who's there needs hard prison versus maybe some option like community corrections. How does this bill help balance that out so we do take care of the people that are bad folks, but do it without breaking the bank?
Well, first of all, it doesn't reduce any of the statutory maximums, nor does it change the federal sentencing guidelines, but it does adjust some of the mandatory minimums. And it does so in a pretty modest fashion. For example, it takes the 3 strikes conviction that could result in a mandatory life sentence and takes it down to 25 years. 25 years for most offenders is going to be a de facto life sentence anyway, at least when you talk about the age at which most offenders are likely to commit. Now, it's different if you're a serial violent offender or something like that, but this isn't dealing with those. This gives federal judges an additional degree of discretion with regard to relatively low-level, relatively non-violent offenders.
There have been a number of states who have enacted similar reforms, and they've seen not only significant budget savings, but they've actually seen a decline in crime.
Yes, that's exactly right. We've got a number of states, including some conservative states like Georgia and Texas. What they've seen is that recidivism has gone way down. The risk of people recommitting these offenses when they have access to these kinds of rehabilitative training systems, these job training networks, what they find is that prisoners, when they are finally released, are more likely to go into a job, and when they're more likely to have a job, they're likely to be connected to their families, less likely to get back involved in crime again.
You've got some Republicans who are opposed to it, but this has also had some support from Democrats, including some very left of center Democrats, not in the Senate, but Van Jones, for example, is one of the supporters of this measure, has given the president credit for bringing it up. Is it going to pass? Are we going to see this come to fruition?
It's going to pass, Governor. If it's brought to the Senate floor, this will pass with over 70 votes. I teamed up, starting back in 2011, with my friend Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin and I don't see eye to eye on everything, but on this issue, well, we see that it's neither Republican nor Democratic. It's neither liberal nor conservative. This is simply an American issue and a matter of good policy that the country needs.
Well, I'm very hopeful that you will continue the leadership you've brought in. My thanks to Senator Mike Lee. He's going to be working on this, and we're all going to be watching to see if a number of Democrats who've long mouthed support for criminal justice reform will indeed back a bill that's supported by President Trump. I hope you'll keep up with the First Step Act. You can also do that by following Senator Mike Lee on Twitter.